Hi class, welcome to Module 6 of ICM524, where we'll be continuing our discussion and learning about web analytics. I'm excited to continue off of Professor Weingrod last week when he introduced web analytics, and this week we're going to go a little bit deeper, and you can look at it as Web Analytics 2.0. We'll be looking at how you can make sense of all the site metrics and the site traffic that you aggregate, some different platforms as well. And I'm going to continue in terms of, referring to Avinash. Avinash has a book also called Web Analytics 2.0 for anyone that's interested. And I'll probably be pulling elements from the book as well. He makes some really great points in terms of converting and traditional ways that we look at web analytics and really trying to figure out how do we define success for different sites and different campaigns. So let's begin with a quick overview. Like I said, we're going to go a little bit deeper in terms of what do these site traffic performance and metrics mean. How would you define success? We're going to go back to the key metrics that Professor Weingrod had introduced and leverage off of that, because those are the basic components and basically your fundamental data that you'll be using. And from there, I'll be showing you some different platforms such as Chartbeat, WordPress, showing Google Analytics, again, the Google Analytics plugin into WordPress, and then Omniture. Omniture is probably, the larger Adobe Site Catalyst type of performance dashboards that a lot of companies, enterprise companies, use. So if you're not familiar with it, you probably will get to be familiar with it within your business. A lot of businesses use this, and I just wanted to give kind of an introduction and an overview in terms of the different analytical reports and what you can gain from there. And then, I'll go into just the different indicators. So we'll look at, referrals and how that relates to segmentation, persona, and how you can convert these metrics into key performance indicators, which we'll probably bring back later in the course. But it's always good to keep that in your mindset in terms of, making sense of the data and really leveraging off of it. Page flow as well. And again, just key elements in terms of the Web Analytics 2.0 as it relates to what you see in terms of clickstream data, which are your fundamentals, and how you would really convert that into customer satisfaction. So just a quick review again in terms of the key metrics that Professor Weingrod had shown you and defined and really went over in terms of Google Analytics platform. But you've got your three elements here. You have your audience, your acquisition, and your behavior. So you're looking at visits and page views. You're looking at new visits versus returning visitors. And in terms of, how users or visitors are getting into your site. So then you look into acquisition, which basically covers, what are your traffic sources? Can you find any patterns there? Who are your referrals? Referrals meaning, is it a B2B business type of setting? Or perhaps, there might be a campaign or partnership that's going on. Or is it coming from your main section to a specific section within your site? And then touching upon keywords. And keywords is really, a useful data element in terms of, how people are finding information to your site. Are they doing searches into your site? And this is really interesting in terms of a data point where, your searches could be defined as transactional, informational, or in terms of behavioral searches, where how are people using some key terms to gain information or get led into your site? Are they going to find a specific product that you might be marketing, or is there a specific news trend or topic of interest that you're putting out in terms of your content on your site. And then we look into the bucket of behavior, and that can be anything in terms of aggregating all pages, how visitors are flowing in and out of your site. Are they sticking around? That might also relate back to bounce rate, as well as really going in a little further and exploring your site, and how are they leaving your site. So these are just again, key metrics and fundamentals that are very important for you to really analyze and make sense of. Now here's an overview again of Google Analytics that Professor Weingrod had definitely talked about in the last lecture, and what you see in terms of the overall performance of a site, where you see visits, uniques, bounce rates, anything that shows the behavior of traffic flow from acquisition to behavior. You see down here an overview of the visitors and traffic sources in terms of where the referrals are coming from, and specifically you can even look at what regions and what browsers as well. Diving a little deeper, we talked about new versus returning, new visitors to the sites, that could be defined as uniques, versus returning, that could be accumulating into page views. So you see that there's a breakdown, a differentiation of the visits defined by how you would define new versus returning, and what does that mean in terms of converting these metrics over to your business, right? You see here again with Google Analytics that you can really see in terms of new visits within a certain time frame and returning visitors as well. Now jumping back to a main page, so looking at Google Analytics again, overview of the dashboard, and this is an example of just in terms of an overview dashboard. And if you go into the traffic sources, you can have a breakdown of how visitors are coming into your site, and you see here this is an overview in terms of referring sites, search engines. That's really off of Google, Bing. Direct traffic is likely from the main page of the site to the section of the site. Other could be any site that might be a partner or link building, and referring site takes different elements in terms of broken down by domain. So if there is a lead partner site or sister site that leads traffic into your site, this is where it kind of gives this overview again in terms of like this pie chart, how much is coming in from direct traffic, direct linkage likely off the home page, to general search engine traffic referral. But when you go into the left nav and you click on that, you'll see kind of in terms of Google Analytics something else displayed, where here in terms of the click, you see that the traffic sources are defined again, direct traffic, referring sites, search engines, and then under all traffic sources is keywords and the Google AdWord campaigns that you might have bought up against a key term that you thought was useful for your site. Now I just want to show this keyword situation and this platform because in terms of the drive to common keywords that bring in the traffic to your site, this is really something telling. You can see how people search and really find another avenue into your site. And in terms of search optimization, this is definitely a window into
how there's a traffic flow, what this defines in terms of a persona. If there's a persona of a user that's specific in terms of how they're looking for information into your site, they would probably use keywords to get to that information onto your site. And here we see a breakdown of keywords for a specific time frame. You see, in terms of what this means in terms of conversion from keywords to traffic growth. And you see here below the actual keywords, the visits, the uniques per visit, and how that translates into site performance. So the bounce rate, and you can see in terms of the average in terms of the site traffic as well. And this is how you would have to handle analytics in terms of, okay, now that let's say in terms of uniques and page views or key metrics like keywords, how would you really translate that into site performance for a period of time, and perhaps bring that into a business report that you would, explain to your management or to your marketing team, especially if they have goals aligned to a keyword. So for instance, I'm just going to use my experience in terms of keyword campaigns for something seasonal, for let's say related to sports or for a news event. If I know that at a certain point there's a sponsorship that we're kind of lending itself to, for instance, for maybe a home improvement sponsorship, or let's say a college football sponsorship, I know with the marketing team that there might be Google AdWords that we're going to buy against that term or length of season. But there's also natural elements in terms of keywords like college football or the different matchups that would lend itself into this keyword analysis. And I would take that information and compile it and say, okay, these are major keyword searches and traffic drivers to the site for this said period for the campaign.
So within the next few slides, I'll show you examples and really, touch upon the different key metrics, as well as, how we make sense of the site traffic. So hopefully these, visual platforms and looking at the data will give you a sense of, how you can think about, what you can do with these data points. So perhaps, for instance, looking at uniques and visits, you can see the differentiation and really have an aha moment where you do realize that one visitor can bring in, let's say, 5 different page views. So what would that unique visitor mean to your business or to your campaign or to your content marketing strategy? Is that nature of that unique visitor going to relate into possibly registration or some kind of aggregation of user data for your site, and then just another step in terms of making sense of these different pinpoints across these different platforms are, what type of content is performing well, and, in terms of visitors, how are they flowing to that related content, where are they coming from, and can you make use of that as well in terms of any conversion metrics. So this is something definitely to keep in mind as we go over a few of these examples across different platforms. Some of you are already familiar with WordPress as the blogging platform, and you can see that in WordPress you have a dashboard for performance metrics. And you'll see that in the case of multiple blogging platforms where they do provide some type of analytics so that you can see, the performance of your site, the amount of pages that you post, the comments against that as well. But, here in this WordPress platform, you see on the right where you can pull in Google Analytics within the widget so that you can, definitely see
the traffic and the visits to your blog and to your site. And again, this is through a widget, a plugin that you can get through Google Analytics and WordPress itself. So I'm going to just jump into this screenshot where I put Google Analytics, an example of Google Analytics side by side to this Google Analytics widget on WordPress, and you can see that there definitely is direct correlation, and what you need to see in terms of Google Analytics is apparent in this WordPress plugin. So here you have your overall traffic overview, the basic stats, the visits on a site here, the bounce rate, the direct page views and traffic flow, and the refers. And you see the case here in terms of the Google Analytics dashboard, the overview, the direct traffic, the referring sites, and the refers as well. Now this area in terms of Google Analytics is specific to keywords, and it shows the visits and the page views in terms of how people are getting into the site using the use of keywords. And here on the right is more in terms of a general overview of the overall site traffic in terms of how it correlates to your posts on WordPress, right? So you can see the top posts here in terms of what you've been posting, and then even in terms of if you wanted to break down in terms of top searches, how you would bring in those keywords into that area. But I just wanted to show you just in terms of side by side that this does correlate in terms of what's being tracked and what's being tagged in terms of your site and brought into a blogging platform, and how you can use Google Analytics within such a platform like WordPress, and going back to Google Analytics itself and seeing how that relates to the content site as well. Let's take a look at the Chartbeat dashboard, and here's a demo that's available on the Chartbeat site itself, and you can see that you can use the case study of Gizmodo and its site. Now, like I had mentioned, Chartbeat is a real-time analytics dashboard, and it's used by different news publishers. I've used it in the past, and it's great. It shows the real-time activity on a site. For instance, like ABC News, ESPN, NBC, and Time properties have used Chartbeat to kind of gauge, what's the activity in terms of, the on-page activity. And this is different in terms of the analytics for, let's say, a back-end server activity towards the site. This is more in terms of the on-page and, quote, the real-time activity in terms of, how many people are clicking within a certain time frame onto your site and within your site. So I just wanted to, show this Chartbeat, environment to you. Again, you can, see it on the Chartbeat site itself, and you see that when you hover over this demo, it'll give you, the definitions of what concurrents are. And, this is all enabled, how they're grabbing the data is enabled by the use of JavaScript that you would put onto your site. So in terms of concurrence, it's usually within a certain time period, and you can see, the number of activity and, how you would define the activity. Right, so here with visitor frequency, just like in Google Analytics, and in the previous module, Professor Weingrod had covered over the new and returning visitors and why that's important. And this shows, in terms of new visitors and returning visitors within frequency within the Chartbeat environment and how they define it. So new visitors might be the folks that are coming onto the site or reading an article for the first time in the last 30 days. what's really great about, Chartbeat is you have all of these different areas where you can hover over and you can find a deeper interpretation of the data that's being, really brought in by Chartbeat. So it's incrementally in terms of a faster basis, where it could be every 15 seconds to within any scope between 15 seconds within the hour. And here, you see different social links and direct and search traffic sources, and then the refers. Now, what's great in terms of this refer is it'll show you, what they think in terms of the Chartbeat, what's a great refer. So here, Feedly is probably an external site that links directly to Gizmodo, and they're saying, hey, this is a pretty good return rate, whereas, maybe in terms of like the Google UK version, it's not really that high. And why this is important to you is if you as an organization have a partnership with some of these external refers and you don't see, a good return, well, maybe that's something that you might want to take a look at. In terms of Facebook, this is mobile for Facebook, and this is the Facebook, referring domain in itself. So again, this is not equivalent to the Facebook likes and shares, right? This is really from Facebook directly into someone that's clicked onto a Gizmodo article off of their Facebook page. Now, in terms of top pages, this is where the analytics really help drive the editorial team to figure out what's the top page and story of that moment, of that day. And what's great is that, depending on, how the story is performing, some of the editors might use this information to look into a story and see that if it's a high performing story that's in the bottom fold of their front page, they might go back to, putting that page on the top fold instead, right? So this is where, Chartbeat is really useful in terms of the, providing the analytics and having editors really utilize this analytics to figure out top performing stories and the placement of those stories onto the page. On the left, you see here the different sections. So you can go into a specific, section of the site and also see, okay, within that specific content category, again, what's a story that's performing really well, and you'll see that the refers here change. The traffic sources should also change as well. Direct maybe coming more from the homepage of Gizmodo to the section more so than external links. And then you can also break it down in terms of your authors. If byline is important, if there's a notable or key influencer that's really featured on the site. This is especially for the case in terms of, again, different blogs and different publishers and news sites. Maybe there's, a really well-known writer and, or a beat or a section that's doing really well. So you can actually see in terms of the byline, what stories are doing really well. Maybe it's a trending story of the moment. So, definitely Chartbeat is a tool that you should consider, especially if you work in the news publishing field, but also in terms of, anything that you want to gauge in terms of content and what it really means. Now, this is where we're taking the analytics of visitors and really applying to how can you conform that information over to something useful that you can really use to make a business decision. And sometimes the business decisions could be more in terms of front-end development or front-end display. So like I had mentioned, in terms of, the site itself or the main page itself, if you're seeing that, let's say, this story is performing very high, but we take a look into the actual Gizmodo site. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that and go to gizmodo.com just so that you can see on the front page where in relation some of these stories might be performing, right? So here is the front page, and on the left you see top stories, this science journal paper. Let's go back to the Gizmodo dashboard, and you see that here, this is the top performer. They're seeing in real time that the rate is increasing over a short period of time, gaining, and you can also see it within the actual author itself, right? So here, Ashley Feinberg is the writer, and again, you're seeing this uptick, right? So it's prominently featured on the home page and also mentioned in this widget, which is the top stories category. And this is, like I said, where Chartbeat is very helpful. Again, a deeper dive into Chartbeat once you incur it is a lot of sites use Chartbeat as an indicator for top trending stories because it does, really claim that it brings in the real-time analytics. So in addition to this dashboard setup, there's a heat map that shows kind of a eye tracking effort where it shows, okay, here are some hot spots on the front page or the different section index pages, as well as, incurring from Twitter and using the Twitter Firehose to say, okay, these are trending topics that are really hot on the web. And it's an identifier for these news agencies so that they can see, okay, if they have a story up against this trend, and then maybe they should, bring it to the top fold of their site or have it visible. And like I said, this is where, I'm just going to kind of go over and hover over some of the different widgets here on this dashboard that you can move around. But this is where, it's really helpful in terms of, how to translate this type of real-time analytics on a content site to content publishers.
So here's Mint, which is another real-time analytics dashboard that you can look into for your site. And again, you see an overview with the visits over a time period, refers, pages, searches as well, and looking at the different keywords. And like I had mentioned, keywords in terms of how people are coming into the site or the content of a site. And here, you see refers, whether they be blogs or search engines, and then you can also look specifically into, the actual domains that are referring traffic over to your site as well. In terms of, content-wise, you can see that, you have pages that perform very well, is similar to Chartbeat, and then, different hits in terms of what's popular at the moment, in the past hour, in the past 24 hours as well. And so this is where, again, real-time analytics kind of gives you that up-to-date information and data that you can use to really see how content is performing, or visitors, or the way that visitors are getting to that content within a certain time period. Some of you might already be familiar with Omniture or Site Catalyst. It's part of the Adobe family, and a lot of large businesses and enterprise businesses use Omniture to really gauge their site performance. I think it's definitely one of the more advanced analytics tools that are out there. And here I'm just going to show you a screen grab in terms of different elements that you can see. You can see site overview, and this is pretty much a layout that you can customize. And you can see different site metrics that are important to the site, whether it be referrals, page views, unique visitors, visits at a certain time period. Again, graphically, you can see the key metrics laid out. And perhaps for certain sites, countries, and the place of origin is important to determine key site traffic components, right? So on the left you'll see a blowout of the navigation, and you'll see some core elements. Again, similar to Google Analytics, I think it's a little bit more in depth in terms of the Catalyst Omniture space, where you can really go in deeper in terms of analytics. You can see different ways that the data is aggregated, different traffic sources, different campaigns, visitor retention, and custom conversions. And this is where you would actually define the different segmentation, meaning the different elements. Maybe there might be multiple elements off of the key metrics that you're going to be using to tell a story and to create a report as well. So this is just a overview of once you log into Omniture, some things that you might find in this analytics dashboard. And here's a refer type report in the Omniture analytics tool, where you can see referral traffic defined by search engines. Type and bookmark usually means in most cases direct traffic that might be coming from a main page or a major partner. So for instance, if this is a specific section of a site, type and bookmark might be more from referral from the home page. Other sites, this could be anything in terms of links from other sites. And social networks, meaning Facebook and Twitter, defined by TCO. And while this shows you this pie chart, I'm just going to go into the same report in terms of the breakdown of the different refer types. And if I go in a step further in terms of looking at the referring domains, you can see that, again, I can see more of a different chart, and then I can, really customize the type of metrics. This is unique visitors. That would be important for me looking at referring domains across different search engines. And these, for instance, for Google, these are actually international search engines. And I just also want to point out Bing, Yahoo, and Facebook, and then, likely also TCO as well, which means that it's coming from Twitter traffic. So, in terms of the elements here, where you can see, the different unique visitors from these traffic sources. Again, typed or bookmark might be from the main home page. This section of the site, you see a lot of page views from Google, from an international Google search engine. And back to Facebook, Bing, and TCO, and Yahoo. These are elements that I think are important for you to recognize since you are looking at different social analytics. Just remember, when we look at facebook.com as a referring domain, this is not equivalent to the Facebook likes and shares for a certain content piece or for a post. Facebook.com traffic is actually a click from that domain over into your site. So again, your likes could be, 300,000 likes, but your actual metric in terms of what's leading the click from Facebook.com to your site could be less than that. Could be, let's say, 50,000 from 300, K likes, or in terms of shares, you could have, 50 shares on Facebook, but that might not be how, you're pulling that information into your analytics dashboard. So, here in Omniture, and depending on whatever analytics tool, you might find that you'll have several instances of Facebook, or perhaps even Facebook mobile, or Facebook shares if you have Open Graph established on your site, depending on the tagging structure as well that you relay into your site through social media. That also influences the data that you'll be compiling, or you'll be able to get on your dashboard. TCO relates to Twitter and the clicks off of Twitter onto your site. So it would be that element of clicking on a story that was shared on Twitter into this site as well. So this also could be defined differently if you customize your short links in social media, and that's something that I hope that everyone can keep on the back of their minds as they're looking at social influencers and referring traffic from social media, and seeing that in terms of your analytics tool. The aggregation of data, you can see, is really a better understanding of the user behavior onto your site. So in terms of Avinash and looking at the Web Analytics 2.0, in his book he talks about taking a step further into looking at this foundational data, looking at the behavior of a visitor to a site, and making sense of it all in terms of how that would relate to you defining a successful campaign, and what that means in terms of the user side or the consumer side as well, right? So, in terms of a former, in the former module and the former assignment, you had to define different key metrics, and, how those key metrics might be important to a certain site of choice and to that industry. Now you're really making use of that foundational data, and the next step is elements of that data. You can really combine those different key metrics to again tell a story, right? So when you analyze the qualitative and quantitative data aspects of what you found in terms of site performance, you can really carry that over again into telling the story of what is it that the user might be searching for on your site, and have they successfully found it. In terms of the Web Analytics 2.0, it leans heavily in terms of the customer, the voice of the customer, and customer centric, because that really determines, okay, the why, what else can you get in terms of competitive intelligence and data, and what type of insights would define the success measurements or a value. And this is where reporting structures go a little bit deeper and might be a little bit more complex and complicated. They don't really necessarily have to be complicated, but I'll give you an example where if you combine different elements from your key metrics, then you are actually working a segmentation of that data, and in the end coming out and customizing a report off of that segmentation. I just want to go into this next slide here to have you make sense of the Web Analytics 2.0, the whole chart in terms of clickstream, and the layers on top of that foundational data. And then on the right, this is a little bit of a rudimentary type of image, but it makes kind of sense in terms of what that clickstream data would necessarily convert to. So in your clickstream, that's your foundational data, your new visits, your return visits, bounce rates, referral traffic, right? That's, something that you're seeing, and that's a very base template that you can work off of. Now, in terms of converting that, this is where segmentation builds in, and probably, different tracking structures that you might have used for different campaigns. So again, this is where, for instance, conversion might mean registration. So perhaps it would be unique visitors and new visitors over into registration and logins, etc. And then later you kind of go into sales, and where your company is meeting the customer's needs. Is there, some kind of element and data point in terms of retention or sell-through that you're making sense of, and, coming in hand, meeting in the middle with the customer, and then, the qualitative aspects of, okay, what's next? Is there, some kind of intelligence that you can gain from that data, whether it be competitive or whether it be, again, converting into a return of an investment. So is there, even like customer satisfaction, how is that defined? And is there a frequency or a pattern that you're seeing for that customer base coming into your site, or that visitor coming into your site and, exploring your site further in detail? I just want to share this with the class in terms of, making sense of all the data that you're using off of key metrics, and the metrics that you're getting off of your analytics dashboard. Again, is telling a story, and, this can also relay into different parts of segmentation, and really also in terms of how you would customize a report in telling a story. So this is in a case of, let's say, a developing news story. This is from, when I was a producer at abcnews.com, and, I'm looking at here natural search, the keywords relating to the developing story, and how people might be searching for that topic of interest using these different keywords on the site. And then here you see that I can see the referrals. So here's 56% of the traffic coming in from search engines, and from direct traffic, meaning from the home page, especially if the story is on the top fold of the home page being promoted. Internal links, so perhaps, this is a story that's coming from different sections of the site, and, I'm trying to relay a story where this, is really important in terms of how people are getting into this developing news story, right? So here's the story itself, and then, looking at that exit traffic, and this is also where I might also include bounce rate as well. Where are they going? This 0% exit is just an anomaly for us saying, okay, actually people aren't just leaving the story after they read it, they're actually going on to the next page of the story, or going back to the home page of the story, or they're clicking on a slideshow that shows some kind of related element to this topic, right? So and then here below I'm just picking out different developing news stories that people tend to kind of click into. And this kind of visually shows an on-page element of what you're trying to make sense in terms of the back end metrics. And let me just show you in terms of, an omniture space, what, elements of this visualization might be really aggregated in this type of report. So it would be a page flow report. So here's an example in terms of omniture, how I'm saying the same thing that I just visually showed you. There's a certain amount of people getting to the site, and then where are they going next? There's also in page flow report in Omniture and some other analytics platforms, you can see previous page flow, so you can see where they're coming to that content site or section or destination of interest, and then where they're going from there. So again, telling the story and using data to tell that story, and using key components that you had learned about in the last module, and again making sense of it all and using a little bit further, a little bit deeper in terms of your analytics tool for the nature of that visitor on your site and where they're going to next to get more information. Now, in terms of tagging and tracking as well as segmentation, I just want to bring out some elements that might be factors into understanding. So these elements for data. So in terms of tagging, that could relate really specifically into the code in JavaScript that's embedded onto your site for real-time analytics dashboards to start seeing what site traffic you're getting, in terms of more, fairly quickly. And, this is where Chartbeat will ask, can we embed this data or this code onto your site so that we can really see the optimal site performance every, 15 seconds to half an hour to an hour, right? They're pinging it, their servers. It's not really a server-side situation where it's more of on-site exploration of the analytics that they can aggregate against real-time data. Tracking can be defined in terms of identifiers in the URL string that you could use for tagging a certain campaign. So, for instance, I just took this article, it's a Huffington Post link, but perhaps, there might be tracking involved off of certain keywords like customer service or worst customer service, or maybe it's this group of numbers here, the 4886069, that is being tracked for a certain ad campaign code that relates to a sponsorship off of these type of stories or business stories. And that's kind of a really rudimentary differentiation between tagging and tracking, and a lot of times the lingo is kind of interchangeable, but just so that you kind of have an understanding where some of this might be defined. Again, tagging could be in terms of analytics, where it could be aggregating data off of your site and putting a code on to your site, or tracking, which is using identifiers such as ad units or anything like that off of a certain, like say in the URL, a certain number, a numerical value, or keyword identifier that you can use against your dashboard. Segmentation is where you're in your analytics tool and you're kind of combining different elements of key metrics into dimensions, and Avinash goes a little bit deeper into that in his blog as well as his books for analytics. But you can use multiple key metrics to define a certain segment or group or category, right? So internally you can have different content categories But in terms of the data side, you can pull together elements such as, okay, new visitors from said prefers, so new visitors that are coming in from search engines, for instance, or social networks, that might be a segmentation, or visitors that are coming in from a specific region or country could be defined as segmentation. And that also relates itself into conversions, where you can take that element of segmentation, you can use these different multiple key metrics, and then customize reports into conversion. So, later I'll show you where you can use, visits and new visits, and kind of also use elements of revenue building off of that. And that would be a conversion report. And that measurement could be very specific to the business needs, again, whether it be registration, revenue, or some kind of product aggregation as well. That's defined by that data. And then also segmentation also relates into personas, and personas I really want to emphasize because you're really taking all your data points and looking at the user behavior of your visitor to your site, compiling that with the data to construct that type of consumer, and a lot of marketing, as well as I think research analytics teams really look at the type of persona, and they're kind of constructing this type of person is the one that's really seeking some type of information out, and they're breaking down, this is what this type of person might be, this might be their background, this might be their demographic, this is their behavior on the site, this is what they're clicking on, the type of content, or whether they're a new visitor or a loyal visitor or a returning visitor. And then they're the type of ones that always look up for either videos or recipes or the latest stats and scoreboards, and you can actually see that you can put data up against these type of behaviors to create this type of persona and this consumer and customer that your site is marketing, and trying to get the most useful sense of is your site working, is it meeting the needs of the consumer. So here's a good example in terms of taking the fundamental data and converting it into a report that would be beneficial for your company to figure out in terms of what the return of investment might be. So here you see a campaign conversion funnel, and you're using elements of click-throughs to a certain section of a site, and then this type of visitor actually making some kind of transaction on the site, whether it be checkouts or placing orders, and then in the end the revenue stream that the company could, or the e-commerce site could actually obtain and see within this type of report. So in terms of successful metrics, it's really defined by you as the product manager or the business itself looking into the report, because each report you're telling a story, right? And you're telling a story of the success or the persona or the way that a user or visitor comes to a site, explores the site, gains the most, and where you kind of bridge that gap where you relay to your management and your team what you can gain from this data, and really what is it that the company or the campaign is gaining as well. So this is where you as a business would kind of define what your key performance indicators are as you look at the data, right? So This could be very different across different campaigns and companies, and likely it's going to align with your company goals as well. So if there's a need in terms of, let's say, for instance, video consumption for your site, perhaps it's ad units or time spent on the site through video. You know that you have your video starts and your video completes, and somehow you're going to take that as metrics or analytics that you can use to create a data report of said user persona, someone that's looking to watch a video on a site. They click on the video, so they're in your site, but you're kind of trying to figure out how did they get to that video page on your site. They open that video up, they watch it, maybe 2-3 minutes. There's a couple of ad impressions that hit, while they're watching the video, and then they move on. Do they move on to another video, or do they move on to another part of the site? So you see, this is, a story that's being told using the data that you're seeing in terms of your performance dashboard or analytics tool, and you're trying to make sense of that, right? And you're trying to really make sense of that person that's seeking video onto your site. That's just one example. In terms of the return on investment, that's another thing that your business has to figure out, or your campaign has to figure out, in terms of what's success. Is the return on investment for your site registration of a new user, right? So if there's visitors and page views, can you define who the new visitors are within a certain time frame? And are they being led into a registration page? And perhaps that in the end is something that's a measurement of success and the return on investment for your company to have this landing page or to have a campaign. The thing about return on investment, it could be larger than what the data holds, or what you can really argue in terms of culminating the data together. But it makes a great argument and sense, and just going back to Avinash as well, in terms of the Web Analytics 2.0, is you're seeing in the later stages and that return, the voice of the customer, and really, is the consumer satisfied with whatever product or content that you're putting out there, and is your site analysis and traffic analysis supporting that, right? And this is where the second half of the whole meaning of Web Analytics 2.0 is coming from the fundamentals of data that you aggregate off of the key metrics. Can you convert that into a success story, or somehow relay the data in terms of to your senior management in hopes of things that you're looking towards, right? So again, the key performance indicators, and that relaying into the return on investment for budgeting for a campaign or creating content on a site. So hopefully you've learned a little bit in terms of some elements that can help you tell that story.